Hi, it's Christine Daigle.
I'm Jenna Brown.
I'm Kevin Tumlinson.
And I'm JD Barker. Welcome to Writers Inc. I have to say, we all look very splendid today.
We do. Yeah.
Great.
I'm
So
suffering
for
for
those
our
of
art here right now, by the way. This
yeah,
is
yeah, me
warm
too.
here. You too.
So for those of you not watching on video, Christine took it upon herself to get us Writers Inc. Hoodies. And we are all wearing our Writers Inc. hoodie right now. And as an autistic person, I want you to understand just how difficult this was for me because my clothes in my closet are in a very specific order and I wear stuff like as it comes up in its particular rotation. So you asked me to take something that wasn't part of that process, throw it like in the middle of it, and actually wear it today on a day when I was supposed to be wearing a totally different shirt. So I'm suffering for you, just like Kevin is sweating over there in
We
Texas.
appreciate your discomfort for,
We do.
so we could get this
Life,
You
cool shot on YouTube.
life,
you can
life can be
take the
brutal.
hoodie off afterwards and
Yeah.
Oh, I will.
I like it though. It's comfortable.
No,
It's
it's
got
nice.
a
Yeah,
nice little like the lining is very soft.
Yeah.
hmm
Very This is a good
I
one.
like
This is
I
a
like the
good
strings.
quality. Yeah.
hmm
Yeah,
I
man.
don't
And they
like
all
this.
have our names on it and our individual literary quotes on the
I
back.
love my quote. You guys picked the
This is
quote.
true.
I love it.
Yeah.
Mine was when the going gets weird, the weird turn pro, Hunter S.
Hunter S.
Thompson.
Thompson.
hmm
Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
well,
Yeah, that seems
I don't think we
appropriate.
should reveal any more of them. And like, if people want to see them, I think they should come to the Author Nation conference.
Oh
Check
yeah,
out
Yes.
that's
the
Yeah,
right.
The
that's going to
Writers
be a
Inc.
big
live
one.
broadcast. Yeah, so for those of you who haven't seen the announcement yet, James Patterson signed on to do the keynote.
Woo,
That's
woo.
amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, I've always
Yeah,
considered him the world's most successful independent author. He just uses the
he
TradPub machine to publish independently. That's what he does.
he really is, and I think a lot of people. I mean, they're going to see that for sure at Author Nation when he gets up and he talks and we discuss all of this. But yeah, I mean, you could take him and drop him in any one of these top five publishers. It doesn't matter. He is running that machine from start, from top to bottom.
Yeah.
Every decision, and he is all over the marketing side, and like even his origin story, the way he started off. I think a lot of people, like, they know him, where he is today. They don't understand all the things that happened in order to get there, and like that's where the real gold is.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
think it's going to really resonate with the folks at Author Nation. So I'm looking forward to
I
it.
do too. I think
Me
it's going to
too.
be, yeah, I'm
Yeah, I'm
looking
looking
forward to
forward
it.
to my selfies and making you guys sign stuff. So,
I'm ho I'm hoping that I'm the one who ends up being his MC because, I'm supposed to MC most of that event. So I'm hoping they pick me. But I know Joe's
Oh,
probably going to do the actual introduction. So whatever.
I
nice
know
to
I
Whatever.
get
have
to interview
friends.
him.
High places.
That's cool.
you're going to interview him, JD?
I think that's how we're doing it, rather than him just doing it the straight up talk. But who knows? It might still change.
Oh, that'd be
That would be
good.
cool too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that would actually be
Yeah.
better than because I like Patterson and all, but I don't know if I could watch him do like a 30 to 45 minute, PowerPoint presentation. I
I
just can't
could.
imagine him
Oh,
doing it.
No
he wouldn't.
problem.
I can't see him doing that either. I don't know that he would even want to get up and do like an actual speech. I think where we're really gonna have fun is with Q&A with the audience.
Yeah.
That's what I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's cool.
So,
I'm gonna smell him. Yeah, see what he smells like. I
Joe, if
think
you're
Stop
listening, make
smelling
sure we've got
people,
extra
Kevin.
security on Kevin.
I'm gonna get tackled.
Ah,
Oh, yeah, it
All
smells like
right.
bourbon and Downy.
wow. What a visual. Oh my God.
Kevin's going to scare him off before we even have the conference.
He's gonna love it.
All
He's
right.
gonna
All
love it.
right.
Uh,
What
d-
is in the news?
all right, in the news. Well, quick side question because we have questions
Oh, yeah,
from
we had
Oh
listener
yeah. Okay.
questions.
Yeah.
and
So
I had
this is
dropped
my
them in.
fault. So yeah, we get
All
we
right.
get a lot of emails for the show, and I've got a bad habit of just responding to those emails and kind of answering them like on a one-off basis. And like I'm going to try to get better about just like giving them to the group so that we can actually talk about it on the air. That being said, I think I turned these in last week and we completely forgot to do them.
Yep.
So yeah, so I need to get better at this. So yeah, let's tackle those first.
All right. The
So
first
we'll
question
work.
here, you want me to read them off to you, or you want to read
Yeah,
them?
I guess we'll just go ahead and read through
I'll
them.
read them off like news items. How's that? You said it cost
Very.
you, JD. I'm thinking this is oriented to you. You said it cost you $10 to put an arc in a book blogger's hand. Where do you get that number? Did you just derive it, or is that an actual figure from some service?
I literally just made it up.
Yeah.
No, that's not true. So I've done this in a bunch of different ways. Initially, I would print like 500 ARCs and I would have them shipped to my house, and then I would send them off from here. That got to be a problem, particularly when I was shipping to like Canada and the UK and started having to go out of the countries because like the customs paperwork and all that is a real pain in the butt. So then I started using Lulu for quite a bit. And now I do a combination of printing with Lulu in bulk, and I also, if I have to, I'll send them out through Amazon as an author copy, and just because they can ship them pretty much anywhere, So if it's Ireland or something, they just ship them from the local factory in Ireland and get them over there. The books themselves, I think, are like $5 to $6 most. Then you add the shipping on top, so they always end up between like $9 and $12. They're never
Mm.
the same, but they're in that range. Do you guys do this too?
That I don't I actually don't do a lot of physical books
Yeah,
to book
mostly
reviewers.
ebooks for me. Yeah,
Yeah. But I think maybe I
Well,
should. After talking to you for a while about this, I
yeah,
feel like I could get better coverage that way,
Well, the thing is, yeah, I mean, you obviously save a lot of money doing the ebooks, but
Yeah.
in today's world, so much is visual. I find that when I send them off to somebody, they'll use them in their, they take pictures for Instagram, they create videos for TikTok, they put stuff up on Facebook, and like that book is always part of it. A lot of times they dress it up like a prop or they're holding it or whatever,
Yeah.
but they use it as part of their process. What I've actually seen is a lot of influencers will request both copies. Like they want the physical copy so they can do all that, but they're actually reading it on a Kindle, so they want the electronic one too. So,
Do you
but in my, yeah, I send them whatever they want whenever they want it, because like if somebody's willing to talk about the book, like to generate actual press is expensive, so
Yeah.
if you can spend $10 to $20, max on somebody and they're willing to get out there and talk about your book, I think it's always worth it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so too. Do you so I get a lot of uh books, arcs and stuff from Book Trib. Uh, and they have this little insert they put in them. It's a few things, but like one of them is this sort of one sheet that's got like the author's bio, the book description, and then they kind of handle it like a press release part of it. Do you do things like that, or do you just send
Well,
them a
what I
book?
do, because like if you're shipping through, like you can't really send it off on like a one-off basis unless you're sending it from your house or your office or whatever. So I'll usually come up with an alternate cover and I'll replace the back of the jacket with that same text,
Uh-huh.
so that they know what the marketing plan is and what you're doing to push the book. This way you don't have to do anything special for anybody.
Okay.
Yeah, I've
Uh,
seen it. I've seen it come a lot of those ways because I get a lot from publishers. I've seen them where they put the marketing plan on the back, but they always do, at least from the big five, have that one page. It
Yeah.
usually comes with that one page piece of paper. And then yeah, I love it when they send both the physical and the
I,
ebook.
Here's what you tell me if you think this is a good idea, bad idea, or what. Uh, I was going to start doing something like this, but I was going to generate some video and audio assets for people to use to just cut into like their videos or their podcast or whatever, and just have a link to that.
I think that's a great idea. And one of the things I really wanted to do for something I keep upstairs, which I didn't have time, but I'll do it for the next one. I want to put a QR code on the back of the book that takes those people to a particular page where I could drop all of those kind of assets.
Yeah,
Because a lot of times I get requests for, it could just be pictures of me. Sometimes they want photos of me. They want, they
right.
want pictures, they want this, they want that. But to have like one repository with all of that for a particular
Just
book, I think would
a
be
digital
worthwhile.
press kit for the whole for the
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So
yeah.
I think a QR code on the back of the cover, these promo copies, I think would be worthwhile.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you could do that just through like Vistaprint or Moo or something. Just generate a bunch of QR stickers that you could create via like Canva, really. But do something like that. Order a bunch of your copies. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do is figure out like how do I minimize my overhead because the book is expensive enough. Shipping it is expensive enough. I don't also want to have the cost and overhead and having to deal with printing things out or going and having something printed or whatever. I want to minimize it as much as possible. That's my goal. Efficiency. All right, second question here. Again, I think all these are for you, JD. So
Well, see, this is
didn't
why I usually answer them by email.
that's fine. That's fine. And we get to weigh in this way. But didn't you mention in the past that you run some type of side business that releases new book launches to TikTok influencers? Is that specifically for you or is that open to the public?
Yeah, so that's Best of Book Talk, which is a separate company now. I spun it off about 2 years ago. It's basically BookBub, but for influencers. So I struck deals with all the big five publishers. They provide ARC copies, and then we take those ARC copies, we drop them into an email that looks like BookBub that goes out once a week to people that do, random influencers on TikTok, on Instagram. The list right now, I think, has about 4 or 5,000 influencers on it, with an impact of, probably millions of actual, people that follow them. I did that because when TikTok first came out, I couldn't come up with a way to actually promote my books on there. It didn't make sense for me to like film a video standing there holding my own book. So I created this list. We pushed everybody else's title, and now whenever I want to push one of my own books, I can just drop it into that email and get it in front of that same audience essentially for free. So I kind of use it for both sides. So we get books from the top five, and you can also go to bestofbooktalk.com and you can actually submit a title if you're an indie author, or you're with a big publisher and you want to have your book mentioned on there. So there's different ways to do it. We're trying to figure out how to pivot right now, because if TikTok actually does go away, obviously Best of Book Talk isn't going to quite work. Most of the influencers do post on multiple sites, but we might have to do some rebranding for that.
No, yeah, TikTok.
TikTok.
All right, I was wrong. This last question is for Christine, or at least Christine is mentioned. Christine mentioned co-ops. What are those?
Yeah, so this was in reference to NetGalley. So I think we were talking about how expensive it was to host a book on NetGalley to try and get reviews. So you can join co-ops where you pay a monthly, like for the month or whatever that you want to be in, instead of just paying for it yourself, and you usually get a cheaper rate. JD may know a bit better about this. The only one I know that I can kind of say you could take a look at this one is Victory Editing. So Victory Editing does a NetGalley co-op, and there are other places like that that do it as well. So you can get a discount on NetGalley hosting.
I've never tried a co-op. I usually do it through IBPA. They've got
Yeah.
a discounted rate.
Yeah.
And you could do, I think it's 90 days or 6 months. Like they've got different tiers that you can do. I usually do about 90 days per title. That's long enough to generate some buzz. And then you capture those reviews, and a lot of them, they post on Amazon when the book comes out, which gives you, 100 or 200 or so out of the gate, which is always kind of nice.
Right.
Well, that's all the questions. So let's jump right into the news, so we don't waste any more time. We didn't waste any time. It was all time well spent. New government report addresses copyrightability of AI works. The U.S. Copyright Office has released the second installment of a three-part report on copyright and artificial intelligence. This is based on comments received on the Copyright Office notice of inquiry posted in August of 2023. The inquiry received 10,000 comments from authors, libraries, and publishers. Based on an analysis of copyright law and policy and comments from the public, the Copyright Office made the following conclusions and recommendations. Questions of copyright and AI can be resolved under existing law, and there's no need for legislative change. Works purely generated by AI are not eligible to be copyrighted, but works created by human authors assisted by AI can be given copyright protection. The first part of the report was published in 2024 and addressed the topic of digital replicas, the use of digital technology to realistically replicate an individual's voice or appearance. The final part will address the training of AI models on copyrighted works, licensing considerations, and allocation of any liability. This is what I predicted was going to.
But it's clear as mud. I was trying to read through this and I'm like, but what does this actually mean practically? So you can't purely AI generated material where there's insufficient human control. What does that mean? They said prompts alone do not provide sufficient control.
It means that if I generate, say, a piece of artwork and all I did was put a prompt in, that's what it's saying. If I generate something and all I did to contribute to it, was enter a prompt, that's not sufficient for me to own copyright for it.
Right. But even if you do more than that, so it's going to be analyzed on a case by case basis. So basically
that's just hedging though. Like, that's basically like they're asking like, where's the line between
Where's the line? It just sounds
enough
like
and
court
not
to me.
enough?
Like this
Yeah,
could go to court, you know?
yeah.
I don't, and then they'll look at it. I don't know.
But
I still don't like the whole thing.
here's where I stand. Like, the only things I ever use AI for, I've used it to help with generating pieces for my covers that I design. I'm doing the design work. I'm just
Hmm.
replacing stock photos with AI images and still doing the same level of Photoshop work and everything I did before. And if I'm using it to generate some, the book description for my book, I shouldn't lose my IP because, this one small piece was generated by AI and maybe I didn't influence that, but I did write the entire rest of the book. So there's going to be nuance to this as it goes, but I can already see kind of the general direction the wind's blowing on it. Like there's going to be a lot more allowance than what I think people are prepared for. People are going to be mad.
Well, I mean, it's written in lawyer speak, right? So they never
Yeah.
give you a definitive yes or no. They'd rather create a little bit more tension.
Yeah.
But the gist of it is, I mean, the way I'm reading it, if you tell AI, please write me a book about blah blah blah, and it spits out 80,000 words, and you copy and paste that into something,
Yeah.
that copy and paste as is not copyrightable.
Right.
The real question is how much of a change do you have to make as a human in order to make it copyrightable? Like it's simply formatting it. You're changing the fonts or you're changing this. All of a sudden that's done by a human.
So,
Is that going to be enough? Do you have to edit
yeah.
it? Do you have to do this? Like they're not defining that.
Right.
And
Yeah.
even if they do define it, like there's no way to prove it one way or the other. So like they're basically saying they're going to give you a copyright on it one way or the other. You
Yeah.
probably have to answer that question, how much of it was AI generated. So it's going to be the onus is going to be on the person requesting the
Yeah. Yeah.
copyright.
I'll say this
But
though, we already have a kind of standard for some of this, which is like if you were to take a public domain work, the copyright standard is, I believe it's 33% you have to have contributed to the final work in order for you to be able to have a standalone copyright on that work. So you can't just simply lift a public domain work, put it out under your name, and call it yours. I think they're going to use a similar standard when it comes to AI. Like if 33%, maybe it's going to be higher than that, 60% or 80% has to be contributed by the human, then they'll have that as a metric, but it's exactly what you said, JD. There's no way to check against that. Because even if they're running these scans to say, is this an AI generated work? We already know there's a lot of false positives on that. So there's not going to be a way to enforce against it.
no, this is going to be defined in the courts, and in
Yeah.
order
Yeah.
for that to happen, somebody's got to challenge it. So somebody's going to have to try and get a copyright on something that's going to get approved. Somebody else is going to have to raise their hand and say, "Hey, wait a minute, it shouldn't have been copyrighted." Then it's going to have to work up the court system. So it's years from now, before this is actually,
Yeah.
defined on paper, if it happens at all.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. NetGalley responds to Kobo device owners. Take that, Kobo device owners. NetGalley's newly launched version of Redium. Sorry, let me start this over. NetGalley's newly launched version of Redium LCP protected downloads left some users of e-reading devices, particularly owners of Kobo devices, unsupported for now. The service wrote, "We've been actively in contact with Kobo, and the good news is they do have LCP support on their roadmap. We just don't yet know the exact time frame." They note, since Adobe unfortunately no longer provides active support for their DRM, it is unsustainable for the long term. Their move from Adobe to LCP is part of NetGalley's ongoing security efforts. Okay.
There you go.
I don't think anybody has anything to contribute to that one. So
What happened to Nook? They didn't even mention Nook. Poor Nook owners. All right, continue.
who knows? By the way, on that discussion, I was listening back to our episode about the whole bookshop.org and the e-reader issue, right? And I
Yeah.
came up with a solution for you, Jenna. They have tablets that are e-ink tablets. So it's an entirely e-ink experience, and you can put any e-reader you want on it, and that includes the Kindle reading app. So that may be your solution. Just
She
saying.
won't do it. Won't
Just
do it.
saying. So you're not reading on
Yeah.
your phone and getting migraines, etc.
I
That's what I'm
I
saying.
already said you'll take my Kindle from my cold dead corpse.
All right. Speaking of Kindle, Kindle Vella closure. So Kindle Vella will close officially on February 26th, 2025. Tokens can be used to read published episodes until then. Episodes you've unlocked will remain available in Kindle, iOS, and Android after the program closes. Any remaining tokens will be credited to your account in March in an amount equal to the value. Farewell, Kindle Vella.
Bye, Kindle.
Yeah.
Bella.
It helped
I,
launch a lot of writing careers, so I am sad to see it go,
Yeah.
even though I never did get around to using it.
Yeah,
so
I
what
mean, I
comes
wrote a
next?
lot on Vela, so yeah, it was helpful.
What's that, JD?
I'm just wondering what's going to come next. Like, because I can see Amazon trying to come up with something else, like
Yeah,
this. Like, what is the next platform people are going to like? The other issue that I see is now that Amazon nixed this, like how many people are going to actually adopt whatever they come up with next? Because
right.
they've got a track record now of nixing these things, and
Yeah,
Yeah,
was
I would
it
spend the
Kindle? Was
time.
it Kindle Worlds? Was the one before it? Was that what it was
yes,
called? Yeah,
right.
Yeah, so
yeah,
Yeah,
people, authors spend a lot of time and resources creating a model and whatever this platform is, and then they yank the rug out from under you. I don't know
right.
how many times somebody's going to go through that before they throw their hands up.
Well, and
Well,
worse, they're burning through their credibility with readers. So, there's
yeah,
going to come a point where, as a reader, I'm not going to take a chance on another, amazing Kindle thing that's going to save me money and get me more stories. If, a year from now, it's just going to fold and disappear altogether. Like,
I
you're going
don't
to
know. I
stop
don't know that
risking it.
readers think about that. I mean, listen, there's George R. R. Martin is gonna, if he ever finishes Wins a Winner, it's gonna be an instant New York Times #1 bestseller. Like, and everyone's really angry about that. But like but if it never finishes, like they're not gonna not read another fantasy book. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
There's
but
lots
that's
of
the difference
so
there,
I don't know
though.
that readers think about like
There's no
necessarily.
there's no additional ask from the reader when it comes to, hey, would you buy this book from this author you've already invested in, you already love? But there is a big ask when it comes to, hey, would you try this program that has a monthly fee or whatever, but we promise this time it's going to stick around. Like
I
that's a
don't know.
very
I don't
apples and
know if I
oranges kind of
agree. I mean,
comparison.
I don't know, from a reader perspective, I think the type of reader that is looking for those kinds of things are voracious readers. And they, I think, are willing to try more and are willing to give things a chance more, I think.
yeah,
I don't know. I don't know that I necessarily think a reader necessarily looks at that kind of stuff. I think they get very excited about the possibility and they don't think, oh, well, this didn't work out. I think readers are more forgiving.
yeah. I
I
think
think.
writers will probably be there too if it's done similarly to Vela. I know people are upset it got closed, but if they offer the same bonuses they did for Vela, I'll write for them again. It's more money than I've ever made.
Yeah.
So no
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah, I think yeah, that's true. And all
Yeah.
the authors get their works back, right? From
Yeah. Oh
this,
yeah.
like they can
Yep.
go take
Yep.
in. Yeah. So,
Yep.
all
And
right.
you can put them out anywhere in any format and could while it was going on as long I think they had to be up was it
Yeah.
30 days? I can't remember 10 days or 30 days. I think it had to be up and then you could put it anywhere you wanted as long as it was paywalled. So I mean the terms were good. They were
All
fair.
right.
The money was good in the beginning.
Yeah.
I'd give it
I
another shot.
never I never got around to it. And
Yeah.
you were the one who introduced me to it, and I never got around to it. So, shame on me.
I'll keep my ear to the ground. I'll let you know when the next one's coming.
Well, look, speaking of questions for JD, I know Christine has at least one more question to ask
I
JD.
do, and it is this. JD, who is up this week?
This week we've got Tod Lending coming on. He's an Academy Award nominated and Emmy-winning producer, director, writer, and cinematographer. His work has appeared on all the major networks and in theaters. He's here to tell us about his transition from the film world to fiction with his debut novel, The Umbrella Maker's Son, which releases February 11th. Here he is, Tod Lending.
All right. So I love when before the interview even gets started, we get a little wind up between me and the guest. I feel like we're friends already, Todd, but I'm talking to Todd
I do
Lending.
too, Kevin.
That's the way that should be, man. If you're going to talk, especially in a setting like this is a kind of an intimate setting where you know, I'm about to dive into your history, your backstory. So we should like each other.
Yes, yes. I should have my defenses down.
Now, I joked before this got started that you have worked with the entire alphabet: ABC, CBS, NBC, HBO, PBS. You've got quite a background well, you've done the whole gamut here. It says you're an Academy Award nominated and National Emmy winning producer, director, writer, and cinematographer. You've got like quite a resume there, Todd.
Mm. 38 years, 38 years of making
38
film,
years,
making
man.
documentaries. Yeah.
How did you documentaries hold a special place in my heart? That was a part of my career coming up, and I know the struggle that goes
Hmm.
into doing that work. How did you come into documentary work?
I came into it through feature film work. I In high school, I thought I was going to be a photographer, a photojournalist. And when I got out of high school, I went to this amazing workshop up in Maine called the Maine Photographic Workshops and studied with some of the masters. And then took 2 years off before going to college and traveled all across Europe and to the Middle East. And it was during that trip I decided I really wanted to tell stories with the image. The still image was just too static for me
Yeah.
and wasn't sufficing as a storytelling form. And so went to college, studied filmmaking, and when I got out, went to New York and started in features actually. Um, the feature work, the fiction work, the majority of it is just dreadful.
Yeah.
It just mind numbing. And I ended up hanging out with documentarians, and that's really how I got into it. Those were the people I hung out with, and I decided that is what I want to be doing. And plus, I wanted to be making films. The feature world is everyone has their own tiny little box that they work within. They're highly specialized. I'm interested in all aspects of it and enjoy the cinematography, the editing, the writing, engaging with my characters. So it just made sense. And I ended up out in LA for 7 years, and that's where I got deeper into it. And then when I came back to Chicago in '91, that's when I formed a company and said, okay, I've got enough under my belt now. I took about 10 years cutting my teeth, and then was ready to form my own company and do my own work. And that's
Yeah.
what I've been doing ever since.
My experience, especially the brief bit of experience I had with the feature film world, was largely about the art of waiting. Like everything is
Exactly.
get everything set up. It's big hurry to set it all up, and
Yep.
now we wait days,
You
weeks,
wait.
months.
Yeah. Yeah. I just don't have the patience for that.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I'm not a patient guy. But
Yeah.
what was it about documentary film in particular, though? I mean, that form of storytelling that appealed to you.
Yeah. So I have to tell you, I became interested in a very specific form of documentary filmmaking, and it's called longitudinal
Mm.
documentary filmmaking. I didn't want to do your run-of-the-mill documentaries that are basically information driven by experts.
Yeah.
I was and I am most interested in character and getting deep into the characters that I follow. And so the type of documentary work that I did, which was heavily funded by foundations, because foundations are interested in funding longitudinal ethnographic type work.
Yeah.
And so these were feature length documentaries where I followed people over years and got very deep into their lives, into their characters, and then had hundreds of hours that you bring back to the editing room,
Yeah.
and you had to craft a story, and you had to know how to craft a story. You had to understand tension and how to build scenes and how to deal with dialogue and imagery and exposition, and all of these are elements that I was amazed to find in writing the novel. It just
Mm.
all of that transferred over to that kind of knowledge, having a sense of balance in the storytelling and what to build towards plot points and turning points. That just is all there. And
Yeah.
so I felt very prepared, actually, to sit down and
You
write.
may have been over prepared. I don't know that
Maybe
we novelists I don't think ever have to deal with like hundreds of hours of, like, we don't exactly have our characters like demanding to dictate to us hundreds of hours of dialogue or anything that we have to sort through.
Yeah. Well, I'm finding with my writing, there's quite a bit I'm throwing out.
Yeah.
I write, and I take the approach to writing, to novel writing, that I took to documentary filmmaking, which is I don't start with a plan.
Yeah.
I have a vague sense of what the themes are in my films and in the novel writing. I start there with who the character is, and follow the character. I let the characters lead me. I let my subjects in my documentary films lead me. And the frustration, I think, that I ended up having near the end of making docs and wanting to switch to novel writing was feeling beholden to their stories.
Yeah.
Which you have to. It's their story. It's not your story. And that's the beauty of novel writing, is it's your story, and you take it where you want to take it. And you can't do that in documentaries. And I was hungry for that.
Well, let's talk about the book then, because now the title is The Umbrella Maker's Son. Hits on some themes and topics that are relevant to today, especially in light of October 7th, last year now. It's hard to believe it's been over a year since those events. But tell us how, first of all, like, what made you decide this has to be a novel? I mean, was there something that inspired it?
Yes. Yeah. This whole idea of pivoting to novel writing, which, by the way, I'm absolutely fallen in love with. I don't know if I'll ever go back to documentaries. I am in love with novel writing, and it happened during the pandemic. And the pandemic hit. I had just come out with a documentary film on 2 Holocaust survivors that I'd followed over the course of 2.5 years. Saul and Ruby's Holocaust Survivor Band is the name of that film. I'm Jewish. I never made a Jewish themed film in all my years. My stuff always focused on African American stories and Native American stories and stories of poverty and addiction and all kinds of social issues. And I never did a Jewish themed story, which is so close to home for me. And so the pandemic hit. I was offered a number of assignments. I turned them all down. I did not want to go out and be shooting during that period, right in the beginning. And I decided it was time to turn inward. Making documentaries, you're looking outward. You're peering through a viewfinder. You're observing the world, and you're telling other people's stories, and it's all very observational. The creativity comes in how you craft the story. But I really felt it was time to turn inward and start tapping, especially at the age. I think age had to do with it as well. I was 61 at that time in 2020. I just turned 61, and I had all this material, all these stories, all these memories, all these characters and situations I had been in, and I felt like it's time to dig down and tell those stories. I've always been interested in writing. Throughout my career, I've taken time to, write short stories and work on screenplays and stuff like that, but never committed myself. And I had no idea if I had the chops to do it, but I sat down and started writing, and I did not know. I started out with a different idea. I was going to be writing a father-daughter story, a father raising a single dad, raising a really tough daughter, which I have lots of experience in. And I thought that's a place I can definitely dig into. And as I started to write, I think within the first 25 pages, I needed to take a step back and examine the main character, the father, and get into some backstory. And I went into backstory, and he was the son of survivors, and I went into the survivor's story, and that story took over. I dropped the father-daughter story. I went into the story of what is now Reuven Berkowitz and the Umbrella Maker's son, and there were, I would say, the two Holocaust survivors that I followed over those 2.5, almost 3 years, and who I remained good friends with now, 10 years later. They were in my subconscious. I was deeply influenced by them, deeply, and so I know they fed into the book. I know my great grandfather, who was an umbrella maker, who left Poland after getting involved in an altercation with a policeman, so the story goes, and ended up stabbing the policeman who was beating up a Jew. That's how my Lending family came over here, was escaping persecution at the turn of the century, time when there were pogroms, and as throughout history, unfortunately, endless persecution of Jews. That played into it. It was, I would say, primarily those two things. When I filmed Saul and Ruby in Warsaw, Lendings are buried in the Jewish cemetery there, who died in the ghetto. So it just all was bubbling up, and those were the seedlings of the story that came to me through my subconscious. I wasn't aware of it when I sat down to write.
Yeah, I mean, do you feel like, because it sounds to me a little bit like, even though you're drawing from your own internal storytelling experience here, but it sounds like you were still sort of wool gathering a little, like you were still reaching out and taking this bit of story here and this bit of story over here, and some family stuff and some experiences you've had in your documentary life. Is that kind of the way? Because so basically you're still making a kind of found piece, a still documentary style piece, but you're able to kind of reshape it, right?
Well, what was wonderful about it was having the freedom to create. I mean, I had these, wool gathering. It was, I started with some bits and pieces.
Yeah.
As kind of my, I don't know, touchstones, I'd say.
Yeah.
And then took off and wrote things but I'll tell you this, I felt it was important to not go, you feel a certain responsibility when you're dealing, at least I do, writing historical fiction. And this was my first historical fiction piece, but I felt like, you don't want to stray too far from the facts, that then your reader starts to not believe it. So it was very important for me, very important. I did additional research as I was writing. The Krakow Diary of Julius Feldman was a very important source. Very short diary. Most people have never heard of it, but it's a 17-year-old's firsthand account of what Krakow was like at the start of the war. So that became extremely important source. The Krakow Pharmacy, written by Tadeusz Pankowitz. I mean, that was also, again, a firsthand journal source to work from. So I felt it was extremely important to not just, make up stuff that never happened. Every event that is woven into the story is based on truth and on fact. And that was important to me.
How do you feel like from a narrative perspective, um, how different is this? Telling, writing a novel, and it's almost like in a way, it's like if you had the perfect documentary subject that came to you, like I know when in doing that work, it's like, oh, if only this thing had happened. If only I had this piece of information. Well, how different is the storytelling when it comes to those two things, documentary versus novel?
Well, that's the beautiful thing about the novel is you can you can put those things in. You can
That's
create
right.
those
It's like a
situations.
sudden source just appears out of nowhere and gives you all the answers you were looking for.
Right, right. I mean, you have to do it in a way that's believable
Yeah.
and that makes sense and that fits the rationale of the story. I felt, one of the interesting things that I went through in learning the language. I mean, I had to
Yeah.
learn the language of novel writing. It's one thing we were talking earlier about, having storytelling skills, the craft of storytelling, and all those components under your belt, which I had from the filmmaking, but
Yeah.
I didn't have the language of the novel. And I started in third person, and I finished my first draft in third person, and then I knew I'm at a point where I need some serious reviewing and feedback, not just a friend who's going to be a reader. And so I decided to hire an editor.
Hmm.
And I worked with two editors who were my teachers. They were my teachers. And without them, it would have been extremely difficult. I mean, I can't imagine finishing the novel and getting it published without the help and the feedback of having two very good editors, take a few looks at the story and give me important feedback. And the most important feedback was number one, you got to get inside your character. This is
Hmm.
not an observational form of storytelling. This is immersive. You have your opportunity here, unlike film, to get inside. And so
Yeah.
third person, you have to know what the hell you're doing, writing in straight third, and you're going inside different characters. I mean, you really, I feel you have to be experienced. Maybe some people come to that naturally. I didn't. So my next step was to go to close third. And close
Hmm.
third, I selected Reuven as kind of my main character, and was going to tell the story from a close third point of view. And that still didn't do it. I
Hmm.
still wasn't deep enough. And so the third draft, I went into first person, and that is what resonated. That felt right for me, and I could build the logic and the rationale, and I think the events and the interpretation of those events and the perspective of those events from this one place, from Reuven, from inside Reuven. And it was very anchoring,
Yeah.
especially the first time novelist, to have that anchor. It simplified a lot. It took out a lot of the complexity of straight omniscient third and brought it down to one character to tell the story from his point of view. So that, and then you have to, of course, stay true to his language,
Yeah.
and that came natural for me. It's like, okay, he wouldn't say that. I mean, this is obvious. You
Yeah.
got to rephrase that. That's you talking. That's not him.
Yeah. Very, yeah. Tricky, because you're, especially
Yeah.
in writing in first person, I think, your tendency to, like I use I all the time, but then I'm not
Mm-hmm.
usually dictating a narrative to anybody when I'm saying it, I guess, you know. So when you did this, when you had to switch POVs, basically, not you switched from third person to first person. Had you already completed the book when you did that? Did you have to do a total rewrite?
Oh, when I switched perspectives,
Yeah,
was I
yeah,
doing complete rewrites? No. Um, No, I, by that time, the story was fleshed out.
yeah,
Um, and there were lots of changes that occurred, but in terms of um, the arcs within the story, a lot of the story arcs remained the same. Some things shifted right near the end. My agent wasn't happy with the ending. So I had an open ending.
Yeah.
He hates open endings. so I took what I heard what he had to say. I mean, you want to leave. It's a tough story, and you want to leave people with a sense of hope. And I always felt that way in my documentaries. I always I don't want to just pummel people over the head with depressing story and not leave them with hope. I think that's really important. So I reshaped the ending, and then he and the editor were both very happy with it. So it wasn't like a complete, walk in the park Hollywood ending that would have killed me, but
yeah,
there's enough resolution, I think, that the reader will feel satisfied with the ending.
Yeah. Actually, I think some of my books have been out for 20 years or so, and I don't think any of them are over. I don't think I ended it. I don't think I ended some of my earliest books.
Oh, really? So they're waiting for a sequel.
They're waiting. Yeah, that's the whole point. I write a lot of series. That's why I write series. So I never have to actually end the book. So it's pretty clear that your documentary experience, film experience, influenced the storytelling that you did in the novel. But what about the other way around? I mean, do you think that producing this book would influence you if you were to go back and make another documentary?
That's a great question, because I was thinking about that the other day. I was thinking, if a documentary landed in my lap that was funded and as on a subject that I was interested in,
Mm-hmm.
I really do think the novel writing, this experience of writing this novel and getting much deeper into character than ever before, would influence the next film. I think I would probably be using a lot more voiceover of my main character to again get inside of the character as best as possible. The frustrating thing, and I encountered this in the film about the two Holocaust survivors, Saul and Ruby. You can only go as far as your subjects can take you. I mean, you can't. The only way to get around that would be to do Werner Herzog's approach, which is to do your voiceover and your interpretation of the story.
Right.
But I've never wanted to do that, because that takes you end up focusing on the filmmaker. It's more the filmmaker's story and experience, and there's nothing wrong with that. But my goal has always been to put my audience in the shoes of my subjects. And it was the same with writing the book. I want to put my readers in the shoes of this main character and get them to experience what he's experiencing. Yeah.
Have you thought about taking all that and doing a documentary about this process? Have you considered that?
Oh, no. I think that'd be dreadful to watch.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, there's some interesting stories. I mean, you wouldn't have to stick strictly with yours. You could find other writers out there and just kind of share the struggle,
I'm trying to imagine the visuals. I mean, you gotta,
right. I know. I can see where that would be a little boring. I just have this hope one day that writers are going to get more screen time, not because we're tragic or blacklisted by Hollywood or what there's interesting stories out there, but I think there's some interesting stories about the people who are trudging along too, but we'll see.
There's some great feature films, I think, on writers, and that one, I think it's just called Genius, which is about Maxwell Perkins and his relationship with is Thomas Wolfe. I thought that was really interesting. really, really well done. And it's so interesting too, as a writer today, publishing, as I understand it, is so completely different than the past. And the role of the editor, I don't know, maybe unless you're a big name, the role of the editor is not as prominent as it was, at that time. Would you agree?
I do. Yeah. I mean, I'm just old enough and have had just enough experience in the industry to have lived through a bit of the overlap where things were a little different, back in like the late 80s, early 90s. Things in the publishing industry have changed quite a bit, but
yeah.
So now what? I mean, what's the way forward? You've expressed that you like this experience, so there's going to be more books, I assume.
Oh, I'm on the next one.
Okay.
I'm close to having a first draft finished. I'm on it. Yeah.
Is it some form of sequel, or is it a completely different topic?
It's definitely not a sequel.
Okay.
At some point, I wouldn't mind considering writing a sequel to this, but I've got so many other stories I want to get to.
Yeah.
But this one is Jewish themed, but it takes place in Chicago in 1982. Right now it's called Displaced. I mean, that could change. And it deals with a situation that involves a crime that's tied to the past. It's tied to a capo in the camps. And it's a crime that is very morally ambiguous and is extremely complicated in terms of the cause of it. And so that's as much as I can say about it. It's the first draft, so a lot could change.
You may scrap the whole thing, start over. You did that once.
Good. You never know.
What was let's talk a little bit about process. Like, how was this different? If you were, if you're crafting the script and if maybe you're a paper edit or something for your documentary, like, in what way was it different to sit down? I assume, did you handwrite this? Did you type it on a typewriter, or did you use let's get into the actual process a little.
Sure. No, as I said earlier, I let it, once I know who my main character is and kind of the setting, the situation, I let it go. First draft, as everyone says, you let it flow. They say there are two types of writers. There's the gardener and there's the architect. The architect draws up the plans, and I'm the gardener that spreads the seeds, and you don't know exactly what's going to come up. There was a writer, teacher, I don't remember the man's name, but he talks about going into what he called the compost heap of memory and experience, and to get into that subconscious. And that's where I want to write from on that first draft. So once that's out, then I do start to go more into, in some ways, documentary structure mode. In terms of structure, I take a good look at the story, and I really start to think about the building blocks of it and what needs to move, what needs to go, what needs to be shifted. So I was a samurai editor, is what I call myself when it came to my films. I mean, I completely don't have a problem letting go of the babies.
Yeah.
The beautiful scenes that you shot, if it doesn't fit, it's got to go. And I have the same attitude with the writing. I don't care how long I spent on a page or a sentence, or, how beautiful that sentence was, or that phrasing. If it's not fitting, adios. I mean, I get rid of it. I just feel so much better when I'm reading something that's tight well constructed and has the right flow. So I'll take, I mean, that's where I think there's the similarity is in the rewriting. Is there's some similarities with working in film and reworking the edit. You start with your 300 hours of films, and you do selects, and you cut that down to 2 hours, and then you look at that again and cut it down to whatever, an hour 80 minutes. I'm sorry, an hour 60 minutes, and you just keep whittling away till you feel like it's there. But what's different with the novel writing is you're not just chopping away, you're having to create simultaneously. You're having to create new scenes as you go through it to fill holes that are there. So, and the beauty of that is you can do it. In documentary, when you're done, you're done. That's the footage you have to deal with. Now you need to, make a purse out of a sow's ear half the time.
Right.
So, yeah.
Right. All right. Well, we got to wrap up, but this has been great chatting with you. Now, where can people find you and information about the book? The book, by the way, is releasing February 11th, right? 2025.
Correct.
So available for pre-order now.
Correct.
Everywhere fine books are sold or pre-ordered.
Correct.
Where can people find out more about you and the book?
They can go to HarperCollins, to their website, and look it up. And in a few days, I'll have my author's website up and running. todlending.com. If they just want to know more about me, they can also just Google my name. There's a Wikipedia page that comes up. There's my filmmaker website, nomadicpictures.org, that comes up. There's all kinds of stuff. But for the book, todlending.com in a few days. Well, by the time this podcast
by the time this airs,
let me just
just go to todlending.com.
It's ready. It's ready.
All right.
I forgot about that.
No, you're fine. All right. Well, look, Tod, I appreciate it. It's been a pleasure talking to you. And
great talking to you.
Can't wait to see the next book that comes out. I'm looking forward to
it'll be there. It'll be coming. All right. All right. Thanks so much.
So Tod and I bonded like documentary bros.
I saw that.
Yeah, that was fun. So he's a really good guy. And I can't wait to tell him that his episode is live because he's asked me like 5 times. So, hi, Tod. How you doing, man? No, he's good.
There was one question you didn't ask him that I was curious about, and we kind of touched on it off the air. With the strikes that happened, I got a ton of phone calls from friends of mine in Hollywood that, were like, hey, I think I'm going to write that book. How do you go about doing that? It feels like a lot of the screenwriters and people in Hollywood, basically did that. They knocked out books because if you look at our guest list, we've got a ton of, people like Tod coming out with debut books. So.
Yeah, I wish I had thought to ask him that because it didn't occur to me at the time. But maybe I can ask him a little follow-up question.
Well, I think we're about to see something similar happen because of the fires out in LA.
Yeah.
A lot of people that work in that industry, they lost their homes, so they're relocating, projects are getting shut down. There's going to be a big backlash to this or repercussions to it anyway with, like on the streaming side, all of a sudden there's going to be a glut of entertainment at one point because, just like with the strikes when they weren't filming anything, we're about to see that again because a lot of these people aren't working. A lot of projects just aren't moving forward. So right now we're not feeling it, but 6 months to a year from now, there might be a time where there's not a whole lot of content coming out.
Well, one thing I am seeing though is a spike in productions happening outside of the Hollywood system right now, and I can't really reveal some of what I know, but I talk to a lot of people across the industry right now, and I happen to know there's a lot of things going up, brick and mortar in different places outside of LA. There's a lot of stuff happening, so this is gonna be an interesting couple of years. I'm looking
Nevada,
forward to it.
Jeremy Renner up in Reno and Mark Wahlberg down in Vegas. It's not like national news, but they've been working with the state legislature to make different allowances for Hollywood developments to come here, and they're building studios and encouraging people to come here. So that's been going on actually for a couple years, very quietly, but it's been
Atlanta's
happening.
got that going for them too. Texas could have had that, but the Texas Film Commission, I won't even go into it. I'm not happy with the Texas Film Commission. Let's just say that. So Todd, as we've kind of discussed, I mean, he's transferring his storytelling skills from his work in documentary film. Are there any skills that you guys have, or specialized skills or knowledge that has helped you shape your storytelling ability outside of writing novels?
Yes. You might know that I'm a psychologist. Understanding people and their motivations helps with character a little bit.
I concur.
I've got nothing. I mean, if I have anything, I mean, I had mentioned the autism thing at the beginning of this. My memory is insane. I've got no problem remembering stuff when I was like 3 or 4 years old versus, something that happened last week. But it's all like scattershot. It's almost like I took these memories and dropped them in my head and shook it all up. So like I have a hard time telling when certain things happen. But my point is, like, I can reach back into that well. So if I need to write a 6-year-old kid, like, I can reach back to when I was 6 years old and I can pull from that.
That's a handy trick.
Or anything along the way.
No, I can
it's just
attest to that. I'm jealous.
There's a lot at this point. I would like to be able to start forgetting a lot, and I think I'm not able to. It feels like the attic is very cluttered.
Maybe I recommend bourbon.
Bourbon.
That's where I think I'm going.
No, I am jealous of this because I noticed when we're first drafting, you'll remember things that happened like 20 chapters ago, and I'm like, damn it, I forgot about that, and I would have to get that in a second draft. But you get them in the first draft, which is annoying and good at the same time. So there's good for us, but I'm like, damn it, why didn't I remember that?
When it comes to certain topics, I have effectively like at least a near eidetic memory, and the same sort. So, and the same thing happens for me with the stories. Like I can remember all the details of the book all the way through, which is very handy. But there's things in my life I wish I could.
Yeah.
There's not
I have the
enough bourbon to
spreadsheet
blot
for my
it out.
revisions. Like I will go and then I'll put, I forgot about this, and I'll have a column of like all the things I need to keep track of going through for a revision. But JD just does that in his brain, so that's cool.
I mean, on this, I have a very eclectic resume, as we have joked about in the past, and all those skills, especially like the things like, because I was a private investigator for a while. That one comes in real handy for some of the storytelling stuff, but just in the energy of crafting the story, those kind of things can be really cool, actually. I mean, I enjoy that. It's a superpower.
Yeah.
So Todd talked about how he initially wrote this in third person and then close third person, and then finally he ends up as first person POV. How do you choose the right perspective for your story? And have you ever had to switch mid-project?
I've done it a bunch of times. But at this point, I can write in any of those and I don't have trouble with it. But when I'm mentoring new authors, and they're having trouble finding a writer voice, I often make them go to first person, because even though it's literally and you're telling it as yourself, it comes across very authentic on the page. And then you can always, like, you could take that and you can change it to third person later if you want to. But a lot of times to get that close up perspective from a character, that's the easiest way to dial it in.
Yeah, I think it depends on the type of story I'm trying to tell. Like, for some, first person is just the better way to tell the story because you want that closeness. But sometimes, I think if you're going to really, really, really torment your characters, a close third works better, just to give a little bit of distance between the character and the reader. I tend to use those two. I don't really like a distant third as much. I like close third. I like first person. I just think it's like I like being closer to my characters.
Yeah, no, I agree with what you said. I think like in brutal horror, I kind of prefer third. So someone talked about it being on the stage with your character versus in the front row of the audience. And if you're doing some
Yeah.
pretty brutal stuff, I'd rather be in the audience.
Right. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, I think
Yeah.
that more distant third person, that more omniscient works for like fairy tale kind of stuff. But
Yeah.
other than that, yeah, I'm not a
Yeah.
huge fan of it.
I
So.
want that plastic tarp over me like they have at Gallagher shows.
I was literally just
Yeah.
thinking the same thing. You got to get a couple rows back at a Gallagher concert.
I wonder how many people we just lost on the podcast 'cause they don't know who Gallagher is.
Right.
We're
Yeah, I think it
definitely
just kinda,
dating ourselves.
yeah, depends. You just,
Yeah.
I don't know. Sometimes you just,
Well, this is the two different worlds too, kind of like I found it fascinating that he even brought this up, but he also mentioned how, he felt like observational, like when he was trying to initially write it, which if you think about a documentary filmmaker, that's their job, right?
yeah.
Everything they do has to be communicated through the lens, what that lens actually sees.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden now you have to get into your character's head, which is the exact opposite of that. And I've seen that, like if you try to write a screenplay from an existing book, it's the same thing. You've got to get away from the characters and get into that visual medium. So it's kind of cool to hear him talk about going the other direction.
Yeah. So speaking of characters, so he talked a little bit about letting his characters lead the story. He talked about being a gardener versus an architect. And I think that's a great way of looking at it. How, what approach do you, my characters run wild. They just do, I throw things at them and let them react to it. So they're in control of that story ultimately. But what about you guys? Is that how you handle it?
Yeah, I'm always the same way. Even if I've got an outline in front of me, I kind of let the characters do what they
Yeah.
want to do. If that doesn't work, I just hit the delete key and they try something else and try something else until I land on something that works. A lot of times I expand on it. Like right now I'm going through the flatliners, basically a second draft on it. I'm taking a lot of the stuff that worked and making it a little bit longer, cutting out the stuff that doesn't work. And a lot of it has to do with the character's point of view and their actions.
Yeah.
I don't know that I give my characters a little bit of freedom, obviously, like so that they can feel like real people, but I try to, as I'm outlining, like the things that I'm thinking about aren't plot. I mean, they are plot, but they are also like what would what would a person's reaction to this be? So
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily just saying like I need this plot point to happen when I'm outlining. I'm also saying like, okay, so if this is who my character is, like why would they be here? What would they do? And then that's sort of how I try to make the decision for the plot point that fits the best for the character. So I kind of try to make sure that like the plot and the character are developed sort of hand in hand.
Hmm.
And sometimes, I mean, it doesn't always like answer the question. Sometimes the drafting, you still come up with things, but the biggest question I ask is not necessarily like, does the plot point make sense, but like, does their reaction make sense? And so they don't tend to run quite as wild. Like they don't make a lot of decisions that surprise me. It's more, okay, if I need to get them here, how would a person with this personality do that? And then I try to kind of figure out how to make that fit.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Awesome.
This is the last question. I want to ask one last one because I think it's important for people to think about. And I've used this phrase recently too, but we touched on Todd's willingness to kill his darlings. That came from his documentary editing experience, he says. But how do you handle the emotional aspect of, cutting content you love, but that doesn't serve the story?
You just do it.
Yeah. I don't get emotional about it. If it needs to go, it needs to go.
You can't get precious about it. You just have to do it. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, I don't know. You just, if you need to have a ritual for it, burn the pages, bury them, have a nice drink with them, cry, like whatever you need to do that suits
I
your
like that.
personality.
Yeah, I
But
like that.
Harlan Coben has a really cool way to deal with this because he had trouble cutting a lot of that stuff. He takes it and he cuts and pastes it into a separate document of stuff that he tells himself he's going to use later.
Yeah.
It never gets used again, and he probably
Yeah.
never even looks at it again. But it makes him feel better knowing that it didn't just disappear, that it's, it's living somewhere else. It moved to another town.
That's what
Yeah.
I do actually.
Oh,
I have something every Scrivener document I open, I create a folder called Ashcan, and it's a concept I stole from the comic book world. And it's the idea of, they would do these pages that wouldn't go into the final work. They'd do the artwork and everything. And so it would be put in what they called an Ashcan. And then later that stuff ends up being sold, they'll sell it at conferences or something. But yeah, I started doing that because, I don't want those words to disappear. They were important to me at the time. I may or may not ever use them again, but maybe my biographer someday will.
So maybe this is also what helps me when I create new documents. So I start with like my outline, and then I will take my outline and just copy paste it into a new document, and that becomes a draft 0. And then
yeah,
I will take that draft 0 and when I make, and I will save it as draft 1. So I actually, like, nothing is ever cut because
yeah,
Yeah.
and because I work very linearly. I mean, I work start to finish, so I'm not jumping around scenes, I'm not doing any of that, so it's very methodical, I guess.
yeah.
And so in that way, I guess nothing is ever really cut for me, so maybe that's why emotionally it's easier for
Yeah,
me,
no,
because
I
when
do
I'm
the same thing. So maybe that's why I don't get emotional about it. Because I'm like, oh, if I don't like the new thing I write, I'll go back to that. I never go back to it though.
no,
So,
yeah,
you
I
know,
know.
yeah.
So
But
I
yeah,
don't
it's
know,
like
that's
it's like a psychological hug or something that it's still there if you need to go back to it, but you never go
It's the
back
fact
to it.
that it's there. That's
Yeah,
that's that's
yeah,
what
yeah.
counts. All right.
It's the literary equivalent of sending the dog to go live on the farm.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So
Yeah.
JD, who's up next week?
Next week, we've got DJ Williams on. This guy's bio reads like an adventure movie. He was born in Hong Kong, spent time in the bush of Africa as well as the Middle East. As an author of young adult fiction, he's at #1 on Amazon in mystery, suspense, and YA fantasy. His latest novel is called Battle of Lion Rock and released last month.
All right, fantastic. If you'd like to be notified as soon as new episodes publish, make sure you go to writersincpodcast.com and sign up now. We'll see you next episode and have a great week of writing.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Writers Inc. Access the show notes and leave a comment at writersincpodcast.com.